Thank you, Holly. This is Scott. Thank you, Holly, for starting the recording. So we'll go ahead and call the January 2023 meeting to order. Why don't we start off first with roll call and introductions?
So this is Holly. I had a question about the roll call. Since we'd be doing a roll call based on folks who technically haven't been voted in yet. There's two positions that haven't been voted in yet. So should I just do the roll call and not name them, and then we'll vote them in after I do the rest of the roll call?
Yeah, Holly, I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Oh, no, I apologize, Daryl. I was just going to say, Daryl and I chatted about it, Holly. We thought we should do roll call first to ensure we have a quorum to do the vote.
Okay.
So if you and Daryl agree, I think we could just skip those particular positions and we'll get the rest of the roster.
Okay. Perfect. Well, then I will go ahead and do roll call. Representative from CCI, Steve, Tina, Julie, or Allison? Okay. Representative from CML, Jacqueline? Okay, hearing no one from CML.
And I do see Tina on the attendee list for the first one.
Oh, Tina Powell. Okay. Tina, if you want to put in the chat or. Okay, gotcha, Tina. I see it in the chat. Great. I don't see Jacqueline in the chat or in the attendee list. So representing accessibility communities, Cheryl Garcia. Okay. Representing members at large, Chad Weber. Okay. Representing the BESP, Tim Kunkelman.
I am here.
Thank you, Tim. Also representing BESP, Mary Jane.
I'm here. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you. Representing the ILAC, Wes.
Present.
Thank you. And representing wireless from T-Mobile, Jenny. Okay. Hearing nobody from T-Mobile. Also
Holly.
representing. Go ahead.
Sorry, Holly. This is Jenny with T-Mobile. I had trouble unmuting. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Representing wireless Viero, Ryan or Mary.
Yes, this is Ryan from Bureau. I'm here.
Thank you. Representing the CLEX or VoIP, Cindy from Cinch.
I'm here.
Thank you. Oh, you know what? Hold on just 1 second. I apologize. Cinch is one of the folks that do need to have a vote in today. So I will mark you here, but note that we need to do that after. Representing Bandwidth, Jay or Erica.
This is Jay. I'm here.
Thank you. Representing Denison County, Jody.
I'm here.
Thank you. Representing Morgan County, Danette.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Representing Grand Junction, Jennifer.
Good morning, I'm present.
Thank you. Representing Larimer, Kimberly or Valerie.
Good morning, this is Kimberly and I'm here.
Thank you. Representing AdCom, Jackie or Ron.
This is Jackie, I'm here.
This is Ron, we're both here.
Thank you. Representing Eagle, Beth.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Representing Sterling, Valicia.
Felicia's here.
Representing Jeffco, Jeff.
Jeff Irvin here.
Representing Delta, Karina. Okay, don't hear anything for Delta. Representing Douglas, Deanie, or Shannon?
Shannon's here.
Thank you both. Representing Denver, Andrew or Jody?
Andrew's here.
Thank
And
you.
I'm here as well.
Great. Representing Jeffcom, Michael or Kevin? I couldn't quite tell who that is, but somebody's here from Jeffcom.
That was Michael Brewer.
Michael, okay. Thank you. Representing Aurora, Tina or Scott, we know Scott's on. Representing Arapahoe, Kathy,
I'm here.
thank you. Representing Westco, Mandy or Matt?
Mandy's here.
Thank you. And representing Garfield, Carl or Tom? I see, no, I don't see Stevens on. Okay, no one from Garfield. And representing Boulder, Patty or Christine?
Patty's on.
Thank you, Patty. We do have quorum with 79% here. So I'll turn it back over to Scott. Oh, I do see Chad. I see you now. I did not hear you earlier, so I'm marking Chad Weber as present.
Yes, I'm present. Sorry, I logged in a couple minutes late.
No problem. If anybody, I'll do a quick, Daryl, you do a quick scroll. If you don't see your name checked and you showed up early, please put it in the chat and we'll mark you as present.
It looks like, this is Scott. It looks like Jenny Santana from T-Mobile's on now as well.
Yes, I did get Jenny. Yep, I got Jenny.
This is Scott. Thank you, Holly, for doing the roll call. So we will move on to the next section, which is elections. The first one up is if the task force recalls in the November meeting, we discussed this. And my apologies, we had a vacancy for Cinch and Jeffcom both, which Daryl and Holly brought to my attention, and I forgot to reach out to them. But since the November meeting, we did reach out to both organizations. And second issue we had with Cinch is, unfortunately, we had their email information incorrectly or missing from the listserv. So they might have been missing the invites. So we did reach out to both and asked if they would still like to continue their position as voting members, and they both expressed interest in doing so. So with that, I apologize, Daryl, I don't remember protocol. Do we ask them now or just name the folks who said that they would be interested in attending?
Yeah, so both organizations are interested in continuing. So what happens is under the task force bylaws, if there's a certain number of meetings missed, then the position is considered vacant. If the people want to continue filling that role, they can, but the commission has to, or the task force has to vote them back in. So that's what's being voted on today. Both the representatives for both positions are willing to continue. Otherwise, if there are other nominees for those positions, we can take those now, and it would be to fill the rest of the term for those two positions.
Thank you for that, Daryl. So I believe then we'll go one by one. So for Cinch, Cindy, just would you like to reaffirm if you were still interested in continuing that position?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And then for Jeffcom, I know that Michael checked in, but we have Michael or Kevin as potential. So Michael, would you like to confirm your interest in continuing?
Thank you, Scott. That's correct. We'd like to confirm that.
I'm sorry, Michael, but your audio is coming across really digitized. But I'm going to assume if you could just put in the chat real quick, I'm assuming that's a yes, you were interested. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Are there any other members who would like to throw their name in the hat ring for those two vacant positions? Okay, hearing none, then let's go one by one. So I will ask for a vote for the approval of the task force for Cindy to continue in the role representing Cinch. All in favor, or actually any opposed, please say so now. Okay, hearing none, thank you, Cindy. We appreciate Cinch's partnership and your willingness to participate, so thank you for that. And then moving on to JeffCom, per the email, Michael Brewer be primary and Kevin, I don't want to say his last name wrong, but Beigert will be the proxy. Is there anybody else who would like to throw their name in the hat for that position? Okay, hearing none, I will ask for, again, a vote to reapprove JeffCom in their position as a voting member of the task force with Michael's primary, Kevin as proxy. Are there any opposed? All right, hearing none, then JeffCom will continue. And again, Michael, and if you can please express to Kevin as well our gratitude for your willingness to participate and continue in working with the task force.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
And your audio is much better. Thank you for that. So then moving on to the next topic, officer positions. I was going to make a joke. I bet you this is why Carl decided not to to join. Carl Stevens isn't on the call, but it is that time of year to do our positions for chair, vice chair, and secretary. And we probably go through those one by one, but Daryl, I again apologize on protocol. I don't know if there's, do we want to discuss the positions a little bit further before we call for the vote?
Sure. So we don't have to vote on the position of chair because the bylaws say that the vice chair automatically becomes the chair. But we do have to get votes on the position of vice chair and secretary. Vice chair can be anybody who is a voting member of the task force. Secretary does not have to be a voting member of the task force. So that can be anybody who is interested in that position who the task force is willing to vote in. Currently you are the chair and Jennifer Kirkland is the vice chair. Jennifer will become the chair at the end of this meeting. Whoever the task force elects to be the new vice chair will become the vice chair at the end of this meeting. Holly is currently the secretary. The commission staff will always provide facilitation in terms of the agenda and the minutes and things like that, because that's part of our job under the rules. But if anybody wants the position of secretary, they can be nominated today, and that does not have to be a voting member.
This is Scott. Thank you for that, Daryl. So with that, as Daryl said, this will be my last meeting as chair. And so Jennifer will move forward as the chair. So I guess we'll take nominations now for the position of vice chair. But before we do, I know that Carl shared this when he handed it off last year. Again, I can't say it better than he did before. Both between Daryl and Holly, they really make serving as chair and vice chair a very easy position. There are times that they reach out for email to help coordination or with questions or opinions about matters to bring forward for some of the training and whatnot. However, they by and large do take on the vast majority of the work and really appreciate all the help that they provide on that. So with that, I just want the group to know it's not a burdensome commitment. It's actually quite enjoyable when you have the time to do so. And it's just a great opportunity to learn more about 911 across the state, as well as just some of the other happenings elsewhere related to 911 services. So with that, we will open up for any, actually, before I do that again, Jennifer, anything that you would like to add as vice chair?
Thank you, Scott. I did want to say thank you very much to Scott for his service as chair over the last year. I appreciate your leadership and your guidance, and I would like to echo your appreciation for Holly and Daryl making it extremely easy to run this group efficiently. So thank you, everybody.
This is Scott. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it. Honestly, it has been very, very pleasurable. I've really enjoyed it. So with that, we will open it up for nominations of vice chair.
This is Jennifer. I was wondering if Daryl or Holly could move the list back to the membership list so that we could see who is eligible. Thank you.
And that's Scott. Thank you, Jennifer. And I see that Andrew's got his hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Jody Slate for the vice chair position.
Thank you, Andrew. And do we have a second for the nomination?
This is Mandy. I'd actually be interested myself.
Okay, so we have two folks, Mandy and apologize now, I just completely lost my train of thought. I know it's your alternate. Apologize, Andrew.
Yep, Jody Slate.
Jody, thank you. For some reason, I was going to say Jennifer. So between Mandy and Jody, are there any other candidates who are interested for the position? Okay, this is Scott, and I think Jody and Mandy, thank you very much. I think there's a collective sigh of relief from the group saying, great, somebody volunteers. Is there anything, why don't we start with Jody first? Anything, Jody, that you would like to say for the group for consideration for your nomination?
Thank you, Andrew, for the nomination, and just that over the last year or so, I've been able to attend the meetings and I've learned a ton. I think it would be great to sit alongside Jennifer as vice chair and continue to learn and continue to grow within the position. So, but I also think Mandy is an excellent candidate as well. So either way, I would be happy and happy to move forward and learn, continue to learn in the position. So thank you.
This is Scott. Thank you, Jody. Appreciate that. Mandy, anything you would like to say to the group?
I would just second her sentiments that I think that anybody, either herself or me, would do a great job. So whatever the group's wishes are and direction, I've been part of this. I've been attending these meetings the entire tenure I've been here at Wesco. So this is going into my 8th year and a voting member for several of them. And I think this is a great opportunity to finally get more involved and in more of a leadership role on this board, which is something I just haven't had the bandwidth to do in the past. And I feel I'm in a position now to do that. So I look forward to continuing my work and my experiences with everyone on this. So however it turns out, I'm pleased to be supportive of and happy to be a part of it all.
This is Scott. Thank you for that, Mandy, as well. So again, Daryl, I think then we would probably need to go candidate by candidate and call for a vote for each. Would that be correct?
Yeah, and it's going to be a little hard to count people. What I would suggest is that maybe we do it by email. If you want people to email me with their preference for Jody or Mandy, then we can maybe after the presentation tally up those votes and provide a result.
I don't know if I was just going to offer, I could also do a poll if you want. I could even put Mandy and Jody in a different room. If we want something more immediate, but also if email works better, that's fine too.
And my only concern with that, Holly, is that we need one vote per voting entity. And there are more people on here than there are voting entities, so that might be a little difficult to police. So Scott, it's up to you how you want to proceed, but that would be my recommendation, is to do it by email.
And this is Scott. I know traditionally that in the past we've also conducted some of the nominations and voting via email. So I think to keep consistent, let's continue down that path. Daryl, would you mind if you don't, after the conclusion of this meeting or during whichever, to send that email to the task force and we can ask for the response of the remainders of the voting members, and probably tally those results pretty quickly.
Sounds good.
This is Scott. Well, either way, thank you very much, Jody and Mandy, for your interest in serving. And as you both said, I think either one would be a fantastic addition to the group or in that role. So thank you very much for your interest in doing so. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, we have approval of the November 2022 minutes. Can I get
Scott,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
we have to vote on secretary as well, unfortunately.
Oh, I apologize, Daryl. Thank you. And so sorry, everybody. So as Daryl mentioned, Holly has served in this role for several years now. It does not require a voting member to do it. So let me ask first, Holly, are you interested in continuing to serve as secretary?
Since Daryl makes me come to these meetings anyway, yeah, it's fine. At least I have something to do during the meetings. So unless somebody else wants it, I'm happy to continue. I would just say if anybody else is interested, please make sure you have full access to Google and the ability to use Google Drive to send out documents and create calendar events.
Thank you, Holly. Those are great points. So are there any other, I will open it up to the floor. Are there any other candidates who would be interested in serving in the secretary role? Okay, hearing none, then I will call for a vote to reappoint Holly in the role of secretary. Any opposed, please say so now. Okay, hearing none. Thank you again, Holly. We really appreciate all of your work and commitment as well. Okay, so now moving on, approval of the November 2022 meeting minutes. Again, call for a motion to approve those minutes.
This is Jennifer, so moved.
Thank you, Jen. I'm sorry.
Jen, sorry. Second.
Okay, thank you. And Deanie, just so you know, I think your audio is kind of choppy too, but moved by Jennifer, second by Deanie. Any opposed, please say so. Okay, then we will consider the November 2022 meetings minutes approved. And we will move on to the next item, which is our ransomware discussion with a presentation by Bill Duggan and Katie Hart.
Hi, Scott, this is Daryl. So it's not so much a presentation today, it's just a discussion. Both Bill and Katie have been through ransomware experiences. So I just wanted to kind of start by asking them both to kind of describe the experience they had, and then maybe as we have additional questions to follow up with that discussion, we can do that. So Bill, would you mind starting with describing your experience with ransomware?
Yeah, that's fine. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, last August, the Fremont County IT infrastructure was attacked by a ransomware attack. We found that it had actually been residing on the computers for quite some time before it was triggered. We are not part of Fremont County, but they provided our IT support. So my in-house computers touched their network and were compromised as well. When the attack happened, the state response team, in addition to emergency management, and I think we even had some federal partners came in, took all the computers. I ended up being kicked off the state radio system because it touched through the recorder until I could verify that that was clean and safe. And so we ended up using emergency management's notebook computers. We were fortunate that our CAD is hosted, so we were able to be back up with CAD in about 4 to 5 hours. 95% of our material is in the cloud in terms of Google Drive and stuff. So we didn't lose significant amounts of data. And it took months to put computers back in, get a network back together. You never think about how many different things it touches, just, you know, down to the copier having to be fixed. We are an isolated network now. We're not on the county network any longer. With a new network, new firewalls, new security. We have 24/7 monitoring for unusual activity. And I'm hoping here in the next quarter to do penetration testing to make sure our new network is as robust as I hope it is.
Thank you, Bill. And how about you, Katie?
Good morning. See if I can. Hi. Thanks for having us, Daryl. So I'll say, you know, I'm over in La Plata County now, but I was directing in Archuleta County for the past few years, and that's where my ransomware experience took place. And honestly, it was back in November of 2019. So I'm really reaching back. I have my after action report in front of me, but what happened for us is one of our employees after hours, and we're still not sure if it was dispatch center or the sheriff's office. I like to think it was the sheriff's office, but accessed a bad link and our entire county network was taken down. We were notified. You know, what was interesting to me about the experience is dispatch was sort of the canaries in the coal mine. I actually notified our IT director before he was notified via their firewall notifications, or I'm not exactly sure what, but you know, their sort of safety notifications. So I thought that was interesting, but I got a call from my dispatchers in the evening that our CAD had frozen. I advised them to log out and back in. They told me they were getting kind of like the spinning wheel of doom trying to access the county network. That's when I sort of had a thought process that something might be really wrong and reached out to the IT director. Our entire county network was taken down for, depending upon which department you were in, from anywhere from 1 to I think 2.5 weeks. Dispatch was the priority to get back up and running, but we were manual for a week. We were able to rig, we weren't on the state DTR at that time with our radios, so that wasn't an issue. But our, I'm trying to think, our phone CPE, I think at that time were on our CAD computers on the county network. So we rigged an anti-alley setup with some laptops and some wiring, if I recall correctly. I'm trying to think. I mean, you know, it was a nightmare. CBI, we were unable to access CBI. We actually had this center, Durango, guard our terminal, and then they were willing to run queries for us as needed. But obviously that, you know, we weren't able to run standard queries on traffic stops, you know, contacts with citizens for our officers. That was an officer safety issue for us. Trying to think what else. Sorry, just looking through this AAR again. You know, the impact was severe. We were able to still provide the service, which is obviously always our priority, but it was definitely an experience. So the human firewall piece, you know, I don't know how many of your counties or cities or agencies are training on that. I know our county really increased our training to be pretty robust after that experience. And I do think that's a really important part just from the lived experience that, you know, it does only take one person to click a bad link to cause sort of that level of havoc. So that's, I'll leave that there, but happy to answer any questions, any more specific questions. And again, I'm so sorry it was so long ago and we went through so much since then with our facility flooded and COVID and we moved facilities, and that it's kind of a distant, I think I repressed it, kind of a distant memory. So I'll turn it back over to you, Daryl.
Well, and you also mentioned, you mentioned that you were looking at your after action report, and I think that's great because it was so long ago that if you hadn't had that, you'd probably forget a lot about what happened and what you did to mitigate it at the time. Bill, did you guys do an after action report as well?
Emergency management did. I don't personally have a copy with me.
Okay. But there was one done, which I think is important because not only will you that will help you retain lessons you learned during the incident, but may actually also be useful to other people. So I know you don't have a copy of it and it's not yours necessarily to give access to, but for either of you, do you know if that after action report is available publicly, if that's something we can make available to other members of the task force?
Yeah, I would be happy to send that out or make that available. Absolutely.
And I can find out for you, Daryl.
Thank you very much. So thinking back on it, is there anything that you wish you had known going into that incident that you learned afterwards or during the incident that might be helpful to someone else if they're dealing with something similar?
For myself, I was actually a director of information technology at another municipality before I came back to 911. When I came here, I relied solely on the county IT staff. So I didn't have all the knowledge that I wished I had of how the county had everything set up and their firewalls and everything. So I wish I'd paid more attention to that. Now that I have my own network, I have much more control and knowledge over that and where all the connections are per se and how that goes. Another thing I really had to figure out is insurance. We did find out that we are covered. So any direct expenses to the cyber attack, we were able to have covered through our insurance. To me, it's just made a more of a priority in the planning for something like that. I came from Kansas. We planned for tornadoes. Cyber attack wasn't something at the top of my list when I came here, and now it is.
Thank you, Bill. How about you, Katie? Any lessons learned that you wish you'd known going into it?
Oh man, so much, right? And I'll say, this was 3 months after I had started this position as director. So I was coming from a line level supervisor position and got hit with this pretty immediately. So I learned a lot, trial by fire for sure. Just looking at my areas of improvement in the after action report, the biggest piece was, and this was definitely my oops, I wasn't clear with CBI when we rolled our terminals that we were rolling because of a ransomware attack. So that was a massive miss on my part. And I think, in that moment, obviously intellectually, I know that that's information that CBI needs to know, but I dropped that ball. And so there was a little bit of blowback there, which I'm sure everybody in this room would not make that same mistake, but it was definitely one that I made. The inability to run queries for law enforcement when we were down like that was hugely operationally impactful and a great officer safety concern. So planning in that way, is really important. Same with, not having that anti-alley functionality, even though our phones were working, we couldn't access that information. Also playback recorders, as we built out our backup center, we installed playback recorders there so that we could, even though we're using handheld phones and don't have any 911 lines, we could still access that information as needed. With the mobile radios, I think as well in the backup center, if I'm remembering correctly, our manual logs were really antiquated. They weren't relevant to how we dispatch. So they were really difficult to work with throughout the outage, and then really difficult to kind of enter after our systems came back up. And then I think the final piece was sort of just a leadership piece. And again, I was new to the position, new to leading a team in that role. but just notifying my staff in a cohesive manner. You know, I kind of dropped the ball on that. That was something that probably should have been sent out as a text message to the group at large to know that there was some serious things going down at dispatch. And when you walk into work, it's going to look very different than you're expecting it to. So just keeping that sort of personnel management piece in the forefront. So all good lessons, so many lessons.
Thank you, Katie. So what I'm just kind of jotting down notes, you know, it sounds like from Bill, some of the lessons you learned were, you know, that would have been helpful for you to have a better understanding of how the county IT system worked. And I think that's probably true for a lot of the PSAPs in the state, is that they really rely on a county or municipal IT department to take care of not all of their technical needs, because PSAP technical needs are pretty specific, but at least things like network management and things like that. So I think that's a really good piece of advice, as well as knowing what your insurance covers if you are the subject of a ransomware or a cyber attack. Knowing what expenses might be able to be covered by that can help you know what things you can do and what things you can afford to do if you're in that situation. And then Katie, I heard from you kind of the need to communicate with partners like CBI you mentioned, make sure that they fully understand what's happening, not just what you need from them at the moment, but what's actually happening, so that they can respond accordingly, as well as communicating with your personnel, which I think is maybe something that might get overlooked. You know, letting people know this is what's happening. So when you come into work, things are going to be a little different today, so that they're not walking into the situation completely blind. It can maybe at least mentally prepare themselves for it a little bit. So I think that's all really good advice. So now, you know, after the fact, well, another question I wanted to ask is, what kind of partners helped you? I know, Katie, you mentioned CBI. Bill, I know that, you know, because at the time the county was providing a lot of your IT, probably your primary partner was Fremont County. But for either of you, and I'll start with Bill, what other partners did you work with to help resolve the issue? Was state OIT involved at all? Was the State Fusion Center involved? Or was it really just you and the county IT department working through these issues?
No, from the beginning, it was a combined EOC with the state IT department and Fusion Center both, and they even had some federal partners in, because this came from out of country. To county IT really didn't help as much get back, other than help me separate out my stuff from their stuff here. I contracted with a private company that does my 24/7 monitoring and remote support, and configure my firewalls and get everything in place to have an independent network now.
Very good. And how about you, Katie? What other partners did you work with?
So, you know, our county IT really took the lead with everything. So I'm not sure how all of that panned out at that level. Again, I was, you know, really mired in the operations of it all, and trying to juggle and be effective there. OEM was really helpful to us. Our emergency manager, you know, was on site with me right after the notification came in, got us some handhelds just in case something happened with our radios, you know, loaned us some equipment so we could rig the Annie Alley on our laptops. Let me just pull that AAR back up. I know county IT contracted with other IT support to come in to help them. We didn't end up having to pay. Our backups had everything, but the process for wiping every computer countywide was onerous, to say the least. So that outside contracted IT support came in. My board was really supportive, helping keep operations flowing. I'm trying to think. CBI. Oh, you know, after our computers got wiped, we had to work closely with all of our vendors, right, to reinstall our software and get all of our settings, upload our map, things like that. So each of our vendors played a pretty large role in getting us back up and running as well, obviously. That's all I can think of right now.
Thank you. So Bill, one thing you mentioned is that you are looking at doing penetration testing now. Is there anything else that you do differently now, or any other precautions that you take that you know, because of this experience that is geared towards making sure that it doesn't happen again, or reducing the likelihood of it happening again? I guess you can never prevent it entirely, or to mitigate it if it does happen again.
Well, the main thing that I put in was the 24/7 monitoring. And then I have redundant firewalls as well with a yearly subscription to keep those updated. So that's to try to make sure that bad traffic doesn't get in. We are looking at doing more end user training. Ours wasn't triggered by an end user in this case, but I know that happens. And then the backup plans is really something that I work on now, in terms of how to get everything back up and running as quick as possible. So those vendor relationships and things like Katie was talking about, those have been stretched over the past few months.
That's all really good advice. Katie, how about you? I know you're no longer at the same PSAP where this happened, but was there anything that was put in place afterwards to, as sort of an ongoing practice, to help prevent or mitigate future occurrences?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I know our IT department increased their firewall protections in some big ways, but I couldn't speak exactly to what those ways were. We have a TID that's off the county network in our backup center, and I'm not sure how the permissions for that work, but this way we can access CBI in case the county goes down again. You know, the end user training that I spoke about, because ours was triggered by an end user, is, I just think, so important. Yeah, it's hard to think about. I mean, we were just a walking coop plan there over in Archuleta for a couple years with so many things, so many occurrences. So it's hard to kind of tease out. We made many modifications and you know, updates to our backup center over each continuity incident that we experienced. So I'm having a hard time recalling which were specific to this ransomware attack. We updated some of our policies in-house, or our resources, like we updated our manual CAD forms, so that was helpful. Maintained those laptops for anti-alley access, although we took our phone, when we made our facility move in 2021, we took our phones off the county network, I believe. Those are the things I can think of.
Thank you. So, you know, from Bill, I heard 24/7 monitoring was implemented, redundant firewalls. He's doing penetration testing, end user training, which is something that Katie mentioned as well as doing improved backup plans. From Katie, I heard increased firewall protections, and I really like, you know, what you said about having some terminals that were separate from the county network. That can be a lot of work to get terminals set up that will operate without being connected to the same network as your other equipment. But that's so important for other things. Even if it's not a cyber attack, if the network just goes down, you can have that as a backup, which I think is a great idea. And again, you also mentioned end user training. You know, one thing I've noticed too, as a state employee, I have to go through a lot of cybersecurity end user training, and some of it is, well, not some of it, most of it is so incredibly basic. And I'm sure that some people need that basic level, but sometimes it becomes hard to actually take it seriously, because it's things like, don't write your password down on a Post-it note and leave it at the coffee shop or something like that. So I think, you know, having end user training that is geared towards the sophistication of your employees, or maybe, you know, something that has not just basic, but also advanced training so that they'll actually pay attention to it and learn from it, I think is something that I might suggest as well. Well, thank you, Bill and Katie. I really appreciate this discussion. I think it was extremely helpful. And what I'd like to do is maybe, you know, because I've been taking a lot of notes while we've been talking, is maybe write up a summary of some of the lessons learned, and maybe advice that other people can learn from your experiences. sorry that either of you had to go through those experiences. But I think one thing to remember is that this can happen to anybody. You know, even if you have all of the most robust protections in place, you know, you don't know who it is who's trying to enter your system without permission, and you don't know when it might happen to you. So being prepared for not only to prevent it from happening, but also to respond when and if it does happen, I think is extremely important for everybody. So with that, I think I'd like to open it up and see if anybody else has any questions for either Bill or Katie before we move on.
Daryl, this is Bill. One other thing that I'd add, since we were a targeted ransomware attack and it resided on our system for quite some time before it was triggered, County IT found that a good deal of the daily and weekly backups they had been doing were compromised as well. Here in my center itself, we use Google Drive, so we had a lot of things on the cloud. We didn't lose that much. But they luckily found an old enough backup that they could get before the ransomware had been placed on the servers, but they lost a great deal of data in that time frame because even their backups were corrupted.
I think that's a really good point, Bill, because my understanding is that with ransomware, a lot of times the malware can be on your system for months or even years before it's finally activated. It kind of sits in there as a Trojan horse, which means that all of your backups might be corrupted as well. So just, I guess the advice there is not to overly rely on the fact that you have backups that you can reload. Anybody else? Anybody questions for either Bill or Katie? Well, thank you both very much. I really appreciate it.
I think I see Joseph. Joseph, did you raise your hand?
I did. I was just going to say that in the ransomware attack that was attempted on Bretza and wasn't successful because Bretza was prepared for it. And one of the other things that helped is after the person went in and planted the code they needed to, they had to restart the server, which created an anomaly, which one of the users who was working at the time noticed, contacted tech support, and also, you know, allowed us to head it off before the trigger date. And so it's important that users report anomalies and stuff that's unusual, so that you know, tech support can investigate these things and you know, address them before they are successful.
You know, Joe, that's a good point, and it also reminds me of something else that I've learned, you know, studying these types of events, is that a real key component is an organizational culture that does not blame, that it focuses first on fixing the issue. Because if you think that you're going to get blamed for a cyber intrusion, you might be less willing to let people know that something is weird, that something may be happening, and try to solve it yourself. And that's absolutely the wrong approach. People need to know that they will not be punished for reporting a cyber incident that or an anomaly that may turn out to be a cyber incident, so that it can be addressed in a timely manner before it gets worse.
And I would just
go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, I would stress to everyone, especially in public safety, it's not if, it's when.
That's such a good point. And, you know, Archuleta County is tiny. You know, before that happened there, if you had asked me the probability of our county being targeted for a ransom, I mean, we're small and we're poor. So it wouldn't have occurred to me that somebody would be interested in throwing a wrench in the works, you know, for such a small county. I would expect that to happen in Denver or Grand Junction or somewhere else, but clearly, you know, no one's immune.
Well, some of the information we received, Katie, was that being targeted to Fremont County, they had found through their investigation that the country doing this was just kind of flooding each area as they went through, and happened to find a vulnerability
Right.
in ours.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's pretty important to know, is that they're always looking for a back door everywhere. And because rural agencies may not always have the same level of IT support as urban agencies do, they're in some ways more vulnerable to these, simply, even though they're not as high on the radar, or maybe not have as much visibility as a bigger agency like Denver or Fort Collins. But because of that, they may be more vulnerable, simply just because they don't have the support to begin with that they may always need. All right, any other thoughts or questions for Bill or Katie?
This is Chad. I've got a question.
Go ahead, Chad.
Bill or Katie, my full-time job is at Regis University, and 2019 didn't treat us too well either. The first day that the first-year student showed up on campus, Regis was attacked. I don't know if anybody saw that. And our systems were completely shut down for about 2 months. But my question to you is, I'm a text-to-speech user, as I'm completely blind. And we have many other adaptive users here on our campus that use different things, both staff and students. We ran into a major access issue there because there was such a major computer. We had to shut down all systems. Well, our systems were all electronically based. Even looking at things, I needed to have access to that. For myself personally, I didn't get access to anything independently until after Thanksgiving. That's kind of telling you some background of kind of the stress and frustration that it just caused that one thing for me to just do my day-to-day job. Did you guys have any access issues for people? Because when the cybersecurity comes in, the FBI showed up at our campus. They immediately went into major firewall lockdown, which actually added a bunch of firewalls, which caused inaccessibility, which obviously is a major ADA issue. So just kind of wondered, did you guys run into any access issues?
That's a great question. We did not that I know of, but I can only speak for my center. I couldn't speak for countywide.
For users with special needs, no, I didn't have any that affected in my center. The one thing that we did have is, by separating off the county network, it shut down all the VPNs. So I had a remote worker that does my recordings for me, and she's now been in office for several months because I don't have that VPN backup yet on the new network.
Yeah, it was I mean, this is kind of more, once again, more on a little more personal basis, but I'm on our accessibility council, and about halfway through that, we had a big meeting, and I'm the chairperson of it. And I brought up to him, I said, does anybody having problems, getting a hold of it? Our phone systems, everything was down. We were all handwritten and one-on-one talking. And I brought up to him, anybody having problems getting on their phone, anybody frustrated by the computer, anybody frustrated about walking across campus and the person's not in their office, you stop doing that. And you can see them all upset. I'm like, okay, guys, that's what it's like for people that don't have access. And that's kind of why I stress 911 and everything else, making sure all that, like even wondering, did your guys' ransomware, your attack, did it affect outside users in your county to have access at all too? That's, once again, just always making sure we have access everywhere, everything there. Thank you guys for your time and answering those questions. I appreciate it.
Chad, actually, it did affect our citizens as well, because it did take down the county phone network for a while. And I would say for months, voicemail and such was totally unreliable. In fact, we had a couple months where my phone would ring and I could answer it, but nobody could hear me.
Oh my gosh.
And it took them a long time to even get that done. And while I've been on the conference with you today, I actually have a company in here today putting in a new separate phone system. One of the other steps we're taking to get separated from the county.
And that's just kind of something I always kind of show to people, how access affects people, and people with disabilities, not just blind, everybody that uses text to speech, like, not having access for a couple of months threw everything in chaos for your county. you know, that's how people are trying, that's how they feel on a daily basis when they can't access these things and when they're not accessible from the user standpoint, not just from a WCAG test. So I appreciate you guys giving me that feedback. That kind of helps me kind of give back to people around here too, things other people in Colorado have gone through and what you guys went through in your county. Thank you for sharing that story. I appreciate it.
And Chad, I wanted to add to that too. I think it's a really good, well, we always have to think about accessibility in all of our planning. And so one of the things that occurs to me, Katie talked about the fact that, you know, after that incident, they made sure that they had terminals that were separate from the county network. If you are a text to 911 county, which most counties in Colorado are, you know, make sure that you have the ability to take text to 911 on those backup terminals as well. And if you have any accessibility software for your own employees, let's say you have an employee who is a low vision employee and you have magnification software on their terminals so they can operate in your PSAP, make sure that you have that on your backup as well, so that they can continue to operate if you have to move to that sort of operation. So I think those are it's very important to include you know, accessibility considerations in all of your planning and as well as for cybersecurity.
Thank you for that support. And I really enjoy that proactive thinking about that separate terminal. That it means a lot to me and people with disabilities hearing you be proactive like that. Thank you.
Sounds good. Any other questions for Bill or Katie? Well, with that, I think I would turn it back over to you, Scott. And then you're going to turn it right back over to me.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. And the only thing is, from an IT perspective, I would add to that conversation is reiterate, like Bill said, it is completely normal in a ransomware event that it's going to take time, no matter what layer of protections you have, to get systems up and running, because they do tend to be on the network for months, if not longer, before they're triggered. And therefore, one of the first steps most organizations will do is a forensic analysis to understand they don't want to just restore that Trojan back onto the network again and get ransomware a second time, which has happened to a number of agencies across the nation. So just from your own planning perspective, just keep in mind that even in the best case scenario, even if you have lots of great technology to support stuff, there will be downtime, and just thinking through how you operate without that technology is very, very important. That's my only 2 cents on it. So moving on to standing reports, Daryl, for the PUC staff update.
Sure. So Scott, if you'd like, I've been multitasking and have been tallying votes by email while Katie and Doug were providing their presentations. So if you'd like, I can provide a result now on the vice chair position.
I'm sure that'd be great, Daryl. Let's go ahead and do that.
So I received 17 votes total, with Mandy as the winner of that tally. So I can provide a vote count if you'd like, but otherwise Mandy is the winner of that.
And this is Scott. Thank you for that, Daryl. I don't think the vote tally or specifics is necessary. We got the tally. So Mandy, congratulations on your position as the new vice chair as of the end of this meeting. And Jody, if you're still interested next year, I'd encourage you to throw your name in the hat again for next year's vote as well. Okay, Daryl, let's move on to the PUC staff update.
Okay, so we have PUC proceedings ongoing. 22R0122T is the notice of proposed rulemaking. This is the rulemaking on improving the Commission's 911 reliability rules. Final rules have been issued in that by the administrative law judge. The deadline for the Commission to stay that decision on its own action was yesterday. We are now in a 20-day RRR period, meaning that if somebody disagrees with the rules, they can file a motion for the Commission to reconsider the rules. Once that 20-day period is up, they will be sent to the Secretary of State's office. We are anticipating an effective date of March 1st, which is a little awkward because there is a deadline in the new rules for CenturyLink to file a network improvement plan by February 15th. Essentially what it means is that the real deadline for that will be the effective date of the rules, which will be March 1st. So I have talked to Tim. Is Tim on the call today? I think he is. I have talked to Tim about getting that filed by the March 1st deadline or within a couple days of that. And it sounded like that was still, that wasn't going to be a problem. Tim, are you on the call, or are you able to speak to that at all?
This is Tim. Yes, Daryl, I am here. We're working on that, on those projects to file, and I think that would be fine. Just as you all might recall, these are all tied to middle mile projects that we filed with the federal government to fund. And the hope is that the federal government will fund those projects. They fund up to 70%, and then we would be coming to the state for the remainder. So what I'm working on is a two-part kind of filing that would have it if it's funded versus if it's not funded by the federal government. But yes, working on meeting that time frame, Daryl. Yes.
Very good. And one thing I would like to do, I know we have presentations scheduled out months in advance, but maybe move the March, whatever we have scheduled for the March presentation, to a later date. And maybe at the March task force meeting, take that time for me to provide sort of an overview of what's in the new rules, what has changed. Or maybe we can do that as a separate presentation. I don't know if anybody has a preference for how we do that. But I do think, if you participate in those workshops, you probably have a pretty good idea of what's changed in there, but a lot of people did not. And quite a bit changed because of the work that was done in those rulemaking workshops over the course of the last year. So I do plan on doing something like that, some sort of presentation or summary for the task force members. We also had the ECATS amendment, 22AL0356T. CenturyLink filed a motion to withdraw that tariff amendment without prejudice, meaning that it can be refiled at a later date, and the commission approved that to be withdrawn. So this proceeding is actually closed, but I know that Tim has been working with you as the stakeholders, meeting with you to talk about how to make changes to that amendment and hopefully refile it in the near future. So hopefully those meetings are going well. It sounds like they are, and that we'll see that refiled fairly soon. Any questions on either of those PUC proceedings before we continue? And I should mention too, I don't usually include individual emergency telephone charge applications in my summary of PUC proceedings, but there is one right now from Gunnison Hinsdale that was filed in the fall. That has received an intervention, so it is now an adjudicated proceeding. I can't talk a whole lot about it because it is an adjudicated proceeding, but I wanted people to be aware of it. And I don't have the proceeding number in front of me right now, but I will send that out to the group so that those who want to follow that proceeding will have the proceeding number and know how to do that. But it is, we do get occasionally emergency telephone charge applications become adjudicated. It's not very common, but it does happen. So that's another proceeding that's on the radar right now. FCC proceedings. The FCC issued a notice of proposed rulemaking on December 21 that would require wireless carriers to provide location routing on all 911 calls, but only if they're originating in IP-based networks. Most wireless carriers are using all IP-based networks at this point, although I think some regional carriers are not. So there is it kind of grandfathers in those non-IP-based networks because it's harder to implement location-based routing on those types of networks. As far as the major national carriers go, AT&T is already providing the service. T-Mobile provides it upon request from the PSAP, and I know I've sent out the forms to all of the PSAPs in the past on how to request that. And Verizon has announced that they're planning on implementing it this year. So that's your three major national carriers. The proposed rules would also require the non-national carriers to do it, and gives them an 18-month time frame to do it. So it gives them 1.5 years to implement that. And then on text to 911 calls, location-based routing would be required for that, and there's a single 18-month time frame for all of that. The NPRM also requires that wireless providers begin providing calls to EZNets in IP format upon request. I've talked to Wes, and he's talked internally with other people at CenturyLink and Intrado about whether this is something that we would want to request right away. And right now, the network is not capable of receiving calls in IP format, but that's something that's done in other states. So it's not something that is impossible or take a long time to implement. So it kind of depends on when these rules become effective. And then there's a 6-month period. If we request it, the carriers have 6 months to start providing their calls in IP format. But that is an important step toward full next-gen 911 deployment. I kind of wish it was for all carriers and not just the wireless carriers, because ultimately it's going to have to be all carriers for full next-gen 911 deployment. But I think the commission is seeing this as a first step towards that end goal.
Daryl?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Tracy Oldemeyer, and I have my hand raised, but I don't think I had my phone off mute so that you could see it. But can we jump back before you switch gears to the Gunnison Hinsdale application for increase in its surcharge? I just wanted everybody on the call to know that the CCOA did also move to intervene because the Colorado Cable Telecommunications Association moved to intervene in that application. And so it's interesting, it is public record, so I'm not going to say anything that Daryl needs to put his fingers in his ears. But if you read CCTA's motion to intervene, its argument is that a local surcharge shouldn't be increased because it has members of its association that offer a flat rate to its customers, and therefore an increase in the local surcharge will cut into the company's profits. And so that's my jaded summary of CCTA's motion to intervene. But the consequences are severe to governing bodies if these are going to be interventions by associations like CCTA going forward. So very important that you get any application to increase your surcharge on file sooner rather than later, because if it results in an adjudicated process, the time that it consumes is huge. And in the meantime, the local authority cannot increase their surcharge. So anticipate more interventions by associations like the CCTA and other things like the annual surcharge proceeding, et cetera. Arguably the logic that they're asserting now for Gunnison Hinsdale applies to other increases of other surcharges like the statewide surcharge. So that's my soapbox on that one. And then I had a quick question in the chat for Tim Kunkelman on the middle mile areas that CTL might include in a plan statewide. Do you know where in the state you might focus on for that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, this is Tim. We filed 3 projects with NTIA. They are to connect, let's see, make sure I have this right. It was Ray to Julesburg. It was Springfield to Los Animas. And it was I think it was Idaho. Let me see here. Is it Idaho Springs? Sorry, I'm just looking at my map. Actually, it would be Georgetown to Dillon.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you. And that proceeding as it's that filing as it is anticipated in the revised rules would open a proceeding which would allow people to comment on those proposals as well. So be prepared for that. And I'll make sure everyone is aware when that happens. And thank you, Tracy, for your detail on the Gunnison Hinsdale application. And Tracy, would it be fair to direct people to contact you or maybe Kimberly as the chair of CCOA if they want to stay abreast of that proceeding in further detail?
Sure, I can be a resource, as can Jody Chin at Gunnison Hinsdale, and then they had to retain legal counsel to represent them in front of the PUC and other expense that they need to factor into their budget, and that's Brandon. And so yes, reach out to me and I can provide additional contact information of others involved as well.
Thank you. And I see Holly just put in the chat the link to the docket, the proceeding here at the commission, and the proceeding number, if you want that, is 22A-0476T. That's 22A-0476T as in Tom. Only other thing on the FCC proceeding that I was talking about is that there have not been deadlines issued for comment. Commission staff is preparing comments to file. As I think a lot of people know, location-based routing has been in the news here in Colorado in 2022 due to an incident. So we want to make sure that our voices are heard on that as well. So I would encourage everyone else, if you have, if your 911 authority or PSAP or your city and county that you operate under have any thoughts about location-based routing as well as IP delivery of 911 calls to EZNets, I think that will be an opportunity for you to weigh in on that. Under state legislature, this is breaking news. 2 days ago, a bill was introduced to provide ongoing funding to the Colorado 911 Resource Center. The funding would come out of the state treasury, not out of surcharge funds. So this would not affect any money that you're receiving through the state 911 surcharge or through your local emergency telephone charges. And it would provide enough money to go back to full-time operation of the Colorado 911 Resource Center and also fund things like state symposiums and training and other things that the Resource Center used to do before we were operating on a shoestring budget to make the money last as long as possible. So if you support that, I would encourage you to watch for when that gets scheduled for committee hearings, or if you don't support it, either way, we want your voice to be heard. So letting you know that that's there. There are 2 other bills that are currently being pursued by the legislative committee, and I won't steal their thunder, and I'll let Jackie talk about that later. But we're waiting to see if either of those get introduced as well. Under federal legislation, there were several attempts last year to pass a bill that would create a new federal grant program for an NG911 technology deployment. All of those failed, either as their own bills or when they were stuck in as parts of other bills. These efforts will likely be renewed again this year, but it will have to be reintroduced because it's a new Congress. None of the bills that were previously introduced can be acted upon. They'll have to reintroduce those as new bills. I know that NASNA is currently working with other national organizations to try to get that moving again. I'll let you know if I hear anything. Another bill that unfortunately failed to pass last year was the 911 Saves Act. The continuing budget resolution that the House passed last year actually included one sentence that stated that the Office of Management and Budget would, within 30 days, reclassify public safety telecommunicators as first responders rather than as clerical staff or administrative staff. And unfortunately, the version of the bill that passed in the end did not include that sentence. But I think the fact that it made it into that bill that was passed by the House was a good sign, and I think there is a good chance that it might get passed this year. But it will have, just like the grant funding bill, it will have to be reintroduced as a new bill. So we'll be watching for that as well. Reports on the surcharge. You can see the state 911 surcharge distributions for November and October, both in between $550,000, $600,000 each month. Prepaid was in October was over 1.3 million that was distributed. In November, it was almost 1.3 million. This month, it will still probably be around that level, but fairly soon you're going to see an increase in that because the increase in the flat rate that was approved by the commission in September of last year will go into effect. It actually goes into effect this month, but because there's like a 2-month delay between the time that the retailer collects it and it gets distributed to you, it might be March before you see that increase, but that should be increasing I'm going to guess it's going to be more around, you will start to see a statewide distribution around 1.5 or 1.6 million, which is amazing considering that we used to not get anything for 911 from prepaid customers. So that's good to see. Deadlines coming up. Mid-June, I would say, is the deadline for filing an application with the commission for an increase in the number of concurrent sessions to be reimbursed beginning in 2024. So if you're going to increase the number of concurrent sessions you're paying for to CenturyLink, you'll want to file that application by mid-June at the latest to have any chance of it being approved in time for you to get reimbursed for those in 2024. Doesn't mean you can't do it, just means that you won't necessarily get credit for it in your monthly 911 surcharge distributions. So very important to get that filed. And mid-February of this year, so coming up very quickly, like within a month, you need to have your application filed if you want to increase your emergency telephone charge rate with a June 1st effective date. So the two effective dates are February 1st and June 1st. If you want the June 1st effective date, that's when you need to file at the latest. I think Tracy's point is very valid, though, that if there are any interventions, that can seriously delay the application process. And there's not a whole lot the commission actually has control over that, because there is a policy and procedure, practice and procedure process that the commission has to go through when it's an adjudicated proceeding. So be aware of that if we do see more interventions from telecommunications carriers or associations like CCTA in the future that might delay your application. So the sooner you file your application, the sooner those can be adjudicated, and the sooner that potentially you can get your surcharge, your requested surcharge approved. So that was a lot. Sorry about that. One other piece of information, though, that I'm very excited about is that I have mentioned this at previous meetings. I was approved to hire a new person. The position description for that new position has been finally approved. So I will be letting you know, hopefully very soon, that it's been posted so that people can take a look at that position with the commission. This will be a new subject matter expert position. It will be, in fact, my current job title of State 911 Program Manager, and I will become the Telecom Program Section Chief. But we'll both be working on 911 issues going forward. So you're not getting rid of me that easily. But there will be two of us so that we can start participating in things like the ECATS meetings and other proceedings as well, where we have to separate trial and advisory staff. We'll have two people to do that with. So with that, I will stop talking finally, and if anybody has any questions, I will try to answer those.
Hey, Daryl, this is Kimberly. I have a question. Just going back to the surcharge increase in front of the commission, we're not planning anything like that, but just watching what happened with Gunnison. When you have the second person, should 911 authorities, what kind of representation does commission staff give to the 911 authority applying for that surcharge increase? Should the 911 authority be there testifying, representing themselves? Are they able to do that on the onset? When you have a second person, will one of those individuals be assigned to the 911 authority to help them and then present information on their behalf? Or how do you anticipate that going forward?
So in any adjudicated proceeding, every party that is a proceeding to that should have their own counsel, and they will have to provide, if there's a hearing where testimony is called for, they will have to provide testimony on behalf of their own application. Once we have a second person who can act as trial staff, that person may also be called upon to provide any expert testimony to back up the claims of either the applicant or the people who are intervening in opposition to the application. The other benefit that having a trial staff person hired will be that they can participate in any sort of meetings that you have, if you want them to. They can participate in any sort of meetings you have with the other parties. So for instance, in the Gunnison-Hinsdale application, if Gunnison-Hinsdale and CCTA wanted to have a meeting to help negotiate or hash out their differences, if you wanted commission staff to participate in that, you could have commission staff do that if they can provide any sort of support or facilitation. Whereas right now I can't do that because that would preclude me from being able to provide advice directly to the commissioners. So yeah, that's really the difference. But I would always strongly recommend that you don't have to have your own counsel to file an application, but be prepared to know that if there is an intervention, you may have to go out and obtain counsel if you don't already have it to serve as your advocate in front of the commission. Did that answer your question?
This is Kimberly. Yes, it did. Thanks, Daryl.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Any questions? All right. Thank you, Scott. Back to you, Scott.
Mrs. Scott, thank you, Daryl. So we're moving on to BESP report from Lumen.
Nice, thanks, Scott. This is Tim. First, Happy New Year to everybody. Hope everybody had a little bit of time off over the last month or so. So I just want to follow up from what Daryl's mentioned about the ECATS amendment process. So yes, we've had a couple of meetings. I think that they've been going pretty well. We've been working on sharing a lot of different information, and Daryl, I'll make sure I keep things sort of away from any conflicts for you. We've been working on updating some cost studies. So we've been doing that. We did learn, of course, about 2 weeks after we started this re-engagement process that our partner Intrado has added some robustness to one of the modules that we've been talking about. So we've got to do a little bit of extra work on recosting one of those. It's a wireless routing analysis module, and so there's some additional functionality that Intrado has developed, and so we're working on that. But overall, we've gotten to a point where I think we're looking fairly reasonable on some of the costs. We've got some information that we're going to work on sharing with the group around just some of our maintenance fees, and then also just the kind of general overall contract that we have with Intrado. That is part of a users group obligation for us as part of our settlement. So I'm working on getting that information put together. We're working on kind of some general understanding of prices that Intrado charges for this service to help compare to Colorado and the type of statewide discount that's going to be provided. So to give folks that information, I think we've done a pretty good job of identifying some issues that need to go into the tariff. So we're working on some additional language, not only that describes the additional modules that we're going to add to what we originally had filed on the amendment, and then just some general process and procedure things around accounting for folks that might already be in a contract, and then how we're just going to roll some of these modules out. So we're working through those things, and then just timing of how that rollout would go, and we're talking about some sort of regionality that might be the way to go on rolling some of these things out. So we're working through some of those types of details, but overall, I've been very appreciative of everybody's time and input on that. And I think that we're making some pretty good progress. I'm hopeful. We've got another meeting next Thursday, and then another one scheduled the following Thursday. And I'm hopeful by the end of that second meeting, or will technically be the fourth meeting, or soon thereafter, we'll have something that I think will be ready to put back in front of folks and ultimately in front of the commission to begin that process. I see Tracy's got her hand up.
Yeah, Tim, I just wanted to say thank you for that summary. That's very beneficial. And per the meeting yesterday, we anxiously look forward to that cost information so we can hopefully streamline this product and it can get rolled out, because I think folks are anxious to start using it. Could you comment for those on task force who have existing contracts, what the plan is for those with existing contracts? Just touch briefly on what your current thinking is.
Well, sure. So, there are a handful of folks who do have a contract, either directly with Intrado or maybe through their vendor to Intrado. And so those contracts won't be interrupted. They will run their course. And so that's some of the language that we're working on in the tariff so that folks aren't paying for something twice. So that we talked about other ways to maybe cancel those contracts, but that didn't seem right. That didn't make a lot of sense. So the plan is those will just go until they expire, and then folks can then buy from the tariff at that point.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, you bet. Any other questions about kind of what we've been working on? I know many of you have been part of it, but I know not all of you. So if there's some other questions I can help answer that I don't run afoul of sharing things with Daryl just yet. Okay, thanks. That's all I have for BES report right now. I will say that we are waiting for these rules to become effective. So we already talked a little bit about those network diversity projects, but there are going to be some additional requirements in those rules around our contingency planning. So I'll begin working on some of those things, and that is still due at the end of April. So there will be some additional information contained in the next iteration of that contingency plan. And I think, Daryl, you had suggested maybe a walkthrough of those rules for folks. I think that would be helpful. And that is all I have. Thank you, Scott.
This is Scott. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate the update. BESP report from Intrado, Mary Jane.
Hi, Scott. I don't have anything to report today. Thank you.
Scott, thank you, Mary Jane. Appreciate it. We'll move on to the bylaws committee from Kimberly Culp.
This is Kimberly. We had no changes recommended or requests to modify or review the bylaws, so nothing for the committee today.
This is Scott. Thank you, Kimberly. Appreciate it. We will move on to Jackie Louise for the legislative committee.
Good morning, everyone. Legislative committee has been very busy, and I want to thank everyone for all their hard work and involvement in this committee. We have 3 proposed legislative initiatives. They have not been introduced. 2 of those initiatives are in the drafting process, the misuse of 911 and the 911 enterprise fund. And those 2 are in the drafting process at this time. Speaker McCluskey wants to sponsor the enterprise fund bill, and she is working with another representative to take on the misuse of 911 bill. Representative Ortiz is looking at reclassification and recognition of 911 telecommunicators. And we are still waiting to hear back from his office and their progress there. We're also looking at, and not probably this year, but depending on how we get this done, we're looking at initiatives for adding 911 telecommunicators to be a protected person, i.e. their telephone numbers aren't listed, those kind of things, along with the police officers. And we're also looking into some pension policies to see if we can also work on that angle for telecommunicators. The action on your part, Michael Brewer from JeffCom has put together an event at Nina's 911 Goes to Washington. There is a breakfast on February 28th. And if you are planning on attending 911 Goes to Washington and also the breakfast, which would be awesome, please contact Michael to let him know so he can have a head count. Are there any questions or thoughts on the legislation?
Hey, Jackie, on the recognition and reclassification initiative, do you know if they're looking at doing that as like a resolution, or is this actually a bill to change statute?
I do not know at this time, as we haven't completed things with Representative Ortiz.
Jackie Louise, if I might.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Daryl, great question. This is actually change to CRS is what we're seeking and working with Rep Ortiz with. Right now, he's deliberating whether this is, they're restricted to only introducing up to 5 pieces of legislation. So he's, kind of in that determination process if this is going to be included in his top 5. And if not, does it go somewhere else where another representative may want to take that on? And we've had some very low level engagement that would suggest that would probably be picked up by somebody, but not willing to go kind of public, put anybody's name out there at this time.
Thank you.
Oh, and in addition, for the legislative committee, our meeting notes are on the task force website, if anybody has any questions there.
And Jackie Louise, if I could maybe just give a plug about the breakfast. That's
yes, please.
Yeah, so that is scheduled. Representative Buck has been kind enough to coordinate, allow his office to coordinate that with us. And we have scheduled a room in the Rayburn House office building. So it'll be Tuesday morning on the 28th, and hopefully strategically before you're able to start your engaging with office visits that day. As well, Monica Million with Amazon has been awesome and is sponsoring that, which basically means she's footing the bill for the continental breakfast that'll go with that.
This is Scott. Thank you, Michael and Jackie. Both. Are there any questions for Michael or Jackie?
So Karen, I see in the chat, Karen Marquez asked if there's an email or worksheet yet to log who is attending. I think probably the only thing we have so far is if people let Michael know that they are attending for the purposes of attending the breakfast. That I know is something that has been done by the Resource Center in the past, but the Resource Center being part-time right now and Connie not attending 911 Goes to Washington, I'm not sure if we're going to be doing that. That is going to be a topic of the Resource Center board meeting later today.
This is Scott. Thank you, Daryl, for the answer to that as well. Okay, we'll move on then to the 988 report update from Kelly Bowman.
Hey, everybody. We just got out of our January enterprise board meeting from this morning. No major updates for 988 other than I believe I mentioned this in one of the last task force meetings. In early November, we did experience a service disruption with the Entrado system. We are still evaluating the full impact of that system disruption, where the 988 phone and text line both were disrupted for about 36 hours. And so again, we are really looking into what happened with that and trying to learn from that particular service disruption, because now this is the second one that we've experienced in the first 6 months of programming. And so Colorado is actually leading a lot of conversations with both SAMHSA, Vibrant, and additional partners to really talk about whether or not we need to establish some MOUs, what that needs to look like for us in the total health of the Lifeline system, and what that really means for us for both compliance and quality assurance. So that is one area that we're looking to partner with some other agencies to clean that up, because it is something that we do have some concerns about. We are also in the process of reviewing a critical incident that resulted in a death from our 988 system. Unfortunately, the call was not connected to our local contact center. The call was actually routed out of state. And so we are doing a critical incident review with both SAMHSA, our contact center, as well as the out-of-state contact center to figure out how we can learn from that and potentially move forward, as well as advocate for geolocation sooner rather than later for 988. That is obviously something that we've been closely tracking and really pushing for, and hope the FCC can support us in that, again, sooner rather than later. We have not seen an increase in volume related to 988 since launch. We're still remaining pretty steady with current volume, although we do expect that that's largely due to the fact that we have not done a huge public promotion campaign. We are still hoping that that is something that we can target for summer of 2023. But again, the geolocation conversation is going to heavily influence how and when we choose to market 988. But with that, we'll also be starting our 988 911 work group that I've been talking about quite a bit, that we haven't gotten off the ground due to capacity. Starting in February, we will be having monthly meetings trying to put our action plan into place. Really focusing on messaging, technology needs, training needs, and figuring out what that's going to look like over the course of the next year and a half. So any questions about 988 that I can help answer?
Not a question, Kelly, but I've got another piece of information to add for the 911 representatives on here. We did learn yesterday through the ESINet users group that 911 centers now are able to program their call handling equipment to transfer calls to 988 directly. And I did send out instructions a couple of weeks ago to the 911 centers on how to do that based on what CenturyLink told me. One thing that was clarified yesterday on the ESINet users group call is that when the call is received by 988, it is routed to a state or regional crisis hotline center. So Colorado has one hotline center operated by Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners for the entire state. And rather than routing it on the caller's area code, it routes it based on the 911 center's area code, which means that any 988 call transferred to 988 from a Colorado 911 center should go to the Rocky Mountain Crisis Center call center, which I think is really good news. It makes a lot more sense for it to be routed that way than based on the area code of the caller, which they could be from out of state. They could have a number ported from another state. So that will work better. I don't know, Kelly, if you have any thoughts on that, or if you have any concerns, because this is probably the first time you're hearing this as well, since it's breaking news.
Well, I am just enjoying, and this is just me being me. I'm loving that I'm finding out about this, that this wasn't something shared immediately with the states, but that's a frustration for another day, because we have advocated exactly for that, is saying that PSAPs we need to be able to ensure that PSAPs are going to get transferred to the local center. So that's great news overall, and my pettiness will survive another day to be frustrated. But I think where we will need to tease out additional conversations that would happen in that work group is also, okay, in the event that, let's say, a transfer happens and the call is dropped, how quickly and how easily does our contact center have access to that information to call back? Because if that person has an out-of-state area code and then gets routed, and for whatever reason the call is disrupted, making sure that they get back to Colorado and not to a different contact center is going to be critical. But I am encouraged that they have been listening to the fact that this is the geolocation piece has been a huge concern from the emergency responder community. So I'm glad to see that that was something that they have implemented. And so we'll talk more about that in the work group on what that can look like, should look like. And I think we will still continue to advocate, though, for geolocation for anyone that calls and texts. But again, that is good news that is something that has already been implemented. I think that's going to make actually getting different sites across Colorado, different PSAPs, more comfortable with transferring calls. I'm hopeful that that's going to lessen the concern around liability and continuity of care.
Yeah, and on that point, I can't really stress strongly enough that a PSAP really should have a policy in place for when it is appropriate to transfer a caller to 988, not just for your own liability protection, but just for consistency's sake and for the sake of your 911 telecommunicators, so they're not having to make that decision on the fly. I know that's something that I would like to see us develop some template policies or a flow chart or something along those lines, so that you don't have to, if you don't know where to start on developing a policy internally, you'll have something that you can use as a starting point. But I know that's something that's still in the works.
And I will say, kind of alongside with this conversation that we talked about this morning, within the work group that we're putting together, it's going to be very similar to some of the conversations that we've had in the past that is also talking about resource navigation and getting folks familiar with the existing resources in the crisis system, as well as some other clunky points within behavioral health. And what I mean by that is, if anyone has been on calls about the new Medicaid benefit for mobile crisis response, we will also be including HCCUF in these conversations, as well as our existing crisis program managers, because we also recognize that some of these conversations will be outside of the scope of 988, but we want to be able to have representation and good conversation about how to address some of those other challenges within the behavioral health system. So we'll have folks from hospitals. We're really hoping, again, to have a lot of emergency responders, PSAPs, law enforcement, fire, EMS, everybody, to make sure that we've got the right folks at the table, so that while we're using this time to actually talk about how our system really works versus how we say it works, we come up with some real solutions. And we also have some conversations about some confusing points like mobile crisis response and co-responder. That's going to be a huge piece of this conversation as well. What is mobile crisis response? We're changing the service definition of that. Who can respond for a mobile crisis response? And so again, as we have these conversations within the space of 988 and 911, we also want to make sure that folks are just better understanding how the system is intended to work, how it actually works, and then also how we can offer some options to support other programs like co-responder or any other community-based service that you have available.
Daryl,
Mary Jane?
this is Mary Jane Rasher from Intrado Life and Safety. I just wanted to make a quick clarifying comment, Kelly. The Intrado company that had the issue with 988 is under the broader Intrado corporate umbrella, but it did not impact Intrado Life and Safety, which, works with Lumen to bring 911 service in Colorado. So that system totally separate.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Janet. And I apologize. This is still me getting used to all these different systems and how they work together. Yes, that is correct. Our system was the only one impacted.
Sure. And I'm sorry. No apology needed. I just wanted to make that clarifying comment, because Intrado is really a holding company for a number of companies. So thank you.
Which, Mary Jane, is why 988 was affected that day, but no 911 centers were, as far as we know.
Exactly. It did not impact 911. Our systems are totally separate. So thank you.
This is Scott. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Kelly, very much for the detailed updates. We really appreciate it. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Equal Access Committee. I see that we didn't receive a report, and I was looking, I still don't see Cheryl or Gil on the call. So if anybody else has an update for that group, they can speak up. Okay, hearing none, then we will move on to Daryl for the Outage Committee report.
So the Outage Committee has one special investigation ongoing, which affected Ouray and San Miguel counties in September. We've had 2 meetings on that outage investigation so far, with another one likely to occur. We'll Tim is working on some action items internally at CenturyLink. And I'll be touching base with him occasionally to make sure that those are still moving forward. And then when those are done, we'll schedule another meeting to discuss the results. We ended 2022 with 9 localized basic emergency service outages, meaning that they were not statewide by any means, but these are outages that affected individual 911 centers or collections of 911 centers. That is the lowest number of outages we've experienced since calendar year 2017. So I think that's good news. One thing I want to point out is that the revised rules recently issued by the commission that we're looking at potentially going effective on March 1st, if there are no RRR motions, would remove the responsibility for outage investigations from the outage committee to commission staff. The outage committee would still have a role to play as a participant in any meetings that may be held to discuss outage investigations. But something else that's, I don't know that was necessarily anticipated when we were looking at those rules, is that it also restricts those investigations to basic emergency service outages, whereas the outage committee isn't necessarily restricted by that because it's not the commission and isn't restricted in its jurisdiction, and it's all voluntary anyway. So there may be some outages that are not basic emergency service outages, but maybe are still important to the 911 centers for discussion. So I could foresee a role for the outage committee in investigating or discussing those types of outages as well, whereas commission staff will be restricted to looking at just basic emergency service outages. So because of this change in how the investigations are conducted, I mentioned this at I think at the November meeting of the task force, I don't believe it's really appropriate for me to be both the commission staff member that's conducting the investigations and chair of the outage committee at the same time. If I had my second person hired, we could potentially split that up that way. But at this time, I think it would really be better if we had a local 911 representative serving in that role. So I would like to ask Scott, as the chair, that you either appoint a new chair or call for volunteers maybe at this meeting, and maybe between now and the next meeting, we can ask people to let you know, or let Jennifer know, since she'll be the new chair, that they are interested in that position, and see if we can move that over to a 911 representative as the leader of the outage committee.
And this is Scott. Daryl, I think let's go ahead and ask for volunteers now, and if we don't receive any, then we can solicit via email. So with that in mind, any members of the task force who'd be interested in serving as the chair of the outage committee?
Tina in chat says, I volunteer as tribute.
So Tina, would you like to?
May the odds forever be in your favor. There you go, Jennifer.
So Tina, is that I mean, would you like to actually throw your name in the ring? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So Tina has volunteered. So I guess take a motion then from the group. Can I get a motion to appoint Tina into that role?
This is Kathy Rayleigh. I so move.
This is Mandy. I'll second.
Thank you, Kathy and Mandy both. Appreciate it. Any opposed, please say so now. Okay, well, thank you very much, Tina. I really appreciate it. And yes, may the odds ever be in your favor.
And might I add, thank you, Tina, for volunteering. Tina just ended her term as chair of the EZNet users group. She did a terrific job in that committee. So I fully support her taking on this role.
That's great news. Thank you, Daryl. Really appreciate it. Daryl, anything else update for the outage committee?
Not at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the group related to outages? Okay, then we will move on to prepaid and collections from Jackie Louise.
Hello, me again. We've been also busy, and we're getting really close to having something up for all the authorities. We have created a standardized form for all the authority boards to use if they so choose. They're not under any obligation to use this form, but it's a standardized form that a governing body can send out to the telecom providers for them to use when remitting, so that we have some standardized remittance information coming in. The part that the committee is still working on, and thank you, Joe, for your work on it, that we will be going through the draft audits and appeals procedure document, because along with that form and our statute, audit and appeals procedure needs to be adopted by the authority in order to leverage any kind of late fees and that kind of thing. So we'll be having that available for all the governing bodies as well. Expect that in the next couple months. And we also have worked with the PUC staff. They have created an internal audit procedure document for their use, and they will be starting to conduct audits. Those audits will be, of course, PUC staff information. We will get general information back to the committee. However, detailed information will be proprietary and limited to the PUC staff. And I will be setting up a meeting fairly shortly for the prepaid committee. Are there any questions, thoughts, concerns?
This is Scott. Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate the update, and thanks to the committee for working on those items. Really appreciate it. All right, we will move on then back to Daryl for the reports committee.
Just as a reminder, the task force decided a number of years ago to provide reports to the commission on its activities every other meeting. So that's basically once every 4 months. This is not the meeting where we do that. So the next one will be due in March. So be watching for that draft report to come out.
This is Scott. Thank you, Daryl. And we'll move on back to you, Tina, for the ESINet users group update.
Hey, Scott, this is Kathy Rayleigh. I'm actually going to be giving that.
Great, thanks, Kathy.
Sure. So we did have officer elections for the ESINet users group. The elections ended as myself being the chair. Danette Martin will be the co-chair, and Daryl Branson remains as the secretary. A couple of other things that were going on. We have one location in Colorado that needs migrated, and that's Cheyenne Mountain. We are still working through some default routing issues that are occurring in the ESINet. Excuse me. As Daryl spoke to earlier, the ability to transfer 988 calls to 911 has been successfully tested and implemented. We are still waiting on a copy of the settlement agreement extension for CenturyLink and West contract. And then to try to clear up our agenda, we created a future roadmap parking lot, which added NIOC and receiving OSP calls into the ESINet in an IP format. And that was about it for the meeting yesterday. Any questions?
Kathy, this is Holly. Could you just repeat who became the co-chair for the ESINet group?
Sure, it's Danette Martin.
Thank you.
This is Kimberly. I just wanted to add some additional information if I could, Kathy.
You go right ahead.
So I know you brought this up and mentioned it about the misroute that we're experiencing in the ESINet, and pulling up some stats and data today, we have been reporting misroutes in the ESINet for more than a year without resolution from Intrado and CenturyLink. And these misroutes, and they're not on a transfer, they're just 911 calls being delivered to one of my PSAPs in Northern Colorado. Yesterday, we've even received them from out of state. And so we're not talking about something in a PBX, something that's kind of funky and on the user end. We are talking about truly calls being routed from our carrier, our BESP and their partner Intrado, to the wrong location. we are talking about 911 calls, and today's call that we had was an echo medical, which for everyone, that is somebody who is not conscious and not breathing, needing medical intervention. So because we're not getting this resolved going through the channels of the EZNet, and we're not getting it resolved, sending over everything we possibly can with call details and opening things on the net and working through those processes that we've tried to get these critical items of the network resolved, we're sitting here stuck up in my area, not sure what to do, outside of making sure that this task force with the Public Utilities Commission, that they're fully aware of this critical issue. And we're going to have to continue to pursue this and go outside of these user groups to try and get this resolved. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware, and I know that we're not the only ones that have experienced the misroutes. We just happen to be receiving your calls. And again, they're 911. So you just never know the level of criticality of them.
All right, Kimberly, thank you for that. We will certainly continue to work on that in the EZNet users group, but as you stated, we may need to take that to a different body to deal with it.
Yeah, the users group definitely, from a 911 perspective, we've done everything that we've been asked to do by the carriers.
Okay.
So thanks.
Kimberly, this is Daryl. I know you report those through the users group so that we're aware of them, as well as making sure that CenturyLink is aware of them, even though you're also notifying CenturyLink and Intrado through 911net and those types of channels. But can you estimate how frequently this is happening at your PSAPs in Larimer County, or is this like you're getting one of these weekly?
Weekly.
So like one a week, you mean?
Yeah, it's weekly in some cases, and this week we've had 3, 2 from out of state and 1 from Fort Morgan. So it's random. We know, we can see it. We've given over the default route. We can see inside the network and see exactly where my PSAPs are in the routing of these 911 calls. But for some reason, Lumen and Intrado are not resolving the issue. So it's concerning. And again, we've been reporting this for 13, 14 months. So I think we're going to have to do something different. But the 911 task force, which is comprised of our BESP, our LEX, our carriers, our 911 community, awareness needs to happen, because this is a critical issue. And I think patience has been had probably a lot longer than we should have to try to address the issue.
Thank you.
This is Scott. Thank you, Kathy and Kimberly, both for the updates. Are there any other questions for the two of them? Okay. Thank you for bringing those to our attention. As a task force, we look forward to next steps. Moving on to the GIS committee, Matt Gage for an update.
Nothing to report at this time.
This is Scott. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. The next one, Daryl, Colorado Public Safety Broadband Update. I was just scrolling. I did not see Brandy in the list. Anybody that may have an update for that? Okay, we will move on then to the PSCS update. Deanie.
Good morning. I just wanted to remind or just let people know about 2 upcoming trainings that are coming up here in this year. That have been addressed during our PSCS meetings. There's a SCIP workshop that will be that is scheduled for February 8th, all day. And you can get that information on the website, the Colorado Homeland Security Emergency Management website section of the website. And then additionally, in May, we have the 2023 Radio Summit that's hosted by PSCS and CCNC. And that will be in Parker, Colorado at the PACE Center, May 3rd and 4th. So keep that as one of your items of interest. And that's all for now.
This is Scott. Thank you, Deanie. Any questions for Deanie? And Deanie, it only took me a year to pronounce your name right. Sorry about that. But
No worries. I appreciate you trying.
okay, let's move on to Division of Fire Prevention and Control from Connie Johnson.
I don't have a update for you right now as the meeting is ongoing and in my other ear.
This is God. Thank you, Connie. Nothing like having the double duty on meetings. Then we will move on. I know Karen was here earlier. If Karen is still on, do we have a rapid SOS update, or Bruce as well?
You sure do, Scott. Hi, guys. I just added a few bullet points, but I'll dive a little bit deeper into these. The first one is rapid SOS security initiatives and how does this impact the ECC? As many of you know, we have several partners in the platform that are delivering alarm information, companies like Simply Safe, Cove, Ecobee, and others. Honeywell will soon be delivering fire alarms in through our platform, probably in the next 6 or so weeks. But there's also another initiative. We know that people in our communities want to have a sense of safety and security. And so there are app providers that are creating panic buttons inside of their application for lone workers, delivery drivers, and things like that, that want to have some connection to 911 or somebody else that can kind of be there with them if they're feeling unsafe or having kind of that unsafe feeling that doesn't necessarily need to go to 911. So Rapid SOS is working on a safety initiative where we've partnered already with a few different companies, one that has already been in beta in New York City since about October. Announcement will come out next week on who that is, but it is a food delivery application. And there's 3 different workflows. The first one in that panic button is very similar to Uber. It's I'm having an emergency, I'm hitting this panic button, and it is a direct dial to 911. So it will connect that driver to you using the traditional voice path. But also if you are using Rapid SOS, you'll be able to see additional data information such as who it comes from, caller name, vehicle information, as well as who they were delivering to and the address of that delivery. Use case number 2 is that like, hey, I'm feeling unsafe delivering to kind of a shady neighborhood, but I just want somebody to be on the phone with me until I complete my delivery. In this case, we would have a Rapid SOS safety agent through our monitoring partner that talks to them and is there with them and making them feel safe. If a situation though escalates and emergency services is needed, our monitoring center then can escalate that call to you all. And that is going to still be like an alarm through a 10-digit line. Again, additional data being available that you will see if you're using Rapid SOS portal and some integrations. And then the third use case here is SMS engagement with that driver and the monitoring agent. So there's a button that they can push that says, hey, I want to chat with you or check up on me in the next 10 minutes if I don't respond. That all is not part of 911 until an emergency occurs, and then the monitoring agent can escalate that to you all. So when the phone rings, here's something that you might hear. This is Rapid SOS safety agent reporting a mobile panic alarm from, and then they would give you the provider name. Obviously, there's questions that you all are going to have to process that call, asking for location, who's involved, what kind of vehicle might they be driving. Hopefully the data in that additional data card can help you not maybe have to ask so many questions. You'll have that data available in the screen. And after the launch, everything will be available in the Rapid SOS portal training for you to view, to send to your telecommunicators on what they might see, how they'll see it. And it will explain these 3 different workflows. So with that, I'll kind of pause for any questions before going into the next one. Cool. The second one is API availability. So we've talked a lot about alarm information. I think several agencies have also been talked to about the ability to turn on a full alerts experience in your Rapid SOS portal, where we cut out the phone call and then you have kind of a two-way chat between your agency and the monitoring center. We have also updated our API for agencies that would like to receive alarm calls as a call for service created in CAD. So if that is something that you are interested, we're happy to work with you and your CAD provider to receive that API. Again, these are things that we do not charge for. However, your CAD provider may charge for an API. And so we'll kind of work through that with you if this is something that you're interested in. As today, foundationally, we're building for residential, commercial, fire alarms. Excuse me. We also have 3 partners that we're working with in the school security space. These 3 partners are implementing a very specific button when a verified active assailant is occurring at a school. And when that situation happens and they poke that button, our API will be able to create a call for service in your CAD that there is an active assailant. So I just kind of wanted to let you know what's going on there. School security obviously has been on the forefront of Colorado's mind for 20+ years. That's not going away, unfortunately, but these 3 providers, I know at least one of them that's in development right now has several school districts in the state of Colorado. So we'll continue to provide updates as they develop, but just kind of wanted to show you what's available today. But really, what are we building towards? And that's that school safety and security application. The next one, for those of you who attended the Tech Showcase, may have heard about our partnership with Axon. So just kind of wanted to remind folks that your CAD system may be able to show you the patrol cars. And if you've purchased GPS on the radio, you may be able to see your person level tracking or blue tracking as well on your CAD. But if not, and your agencies are using Axon Body Worn Camera 3, you do have the ability for eligible agencies to show that body worn GPS location on your Rapid SOS portal so you can see where your officers are. Future would be the ability to see video if your agency wants to, but right now it is location only, so you know where your units are. I think you all know the valuable data that is, so I won't go in there, but I think, Mandy, I believe you all went live not too long ago. If you have anything you would like to add about that.
Hi, Karen. Yeah, we have implemented the Axon Body Worn Cam location in our portal. It's just provides an additional layer of data for our first responders. We dispatch multiple agencies, law agencies, who all utilize, well, most of them utilize these Axon Body Worn Cams, and their agency heads were definitely all for it. It's nice to see, while it provides the location and not the video, that was actually something our law enforcement heads did not want dispatch seeing, and I'm a bit grateful for that. It does show us when an officer or a deputy's body worn cam is actively recording. The little icon turns colors. And again, that's just the additional situational awareness for our communication specialists behind and under the headset to say, okay, not only are they out at this location, they're actively involved in something, and that's indicated by the fact that their camera is on. So we are enjoying having a little bit more visibility to some of those members, and it's, I hope, just going to become more and more robust. We have one agency who their body worn cams aren't 3 or 4. I thought it was 4. I thought it was BWC 4, generation 4, or however Axon classifies the cameras. And they didn't think they had that, so we didn't go live with them. But super simple to set it up, literally just a few minutes. And I think, as with many of these, we also, I think, get many of our alarms through the portal. We're just very big advocates of Rapid SOS and the utilization of it. It's really helped our center have better information faster.
Awesome. Thanks, Mandy, for letting me put you on the spot, because I didn't tell you I was going to do that. And then we know that with Apple releasing Apple crash data or the crash notifications, it has created a lot of challenges, especially for folks up in the mountains, that, you know, maybe you don't have location information. So, or your responders, your search and rescue units, your ski patrol, or your EMS responders don't have the location that the 911 center may have. So we just wanted to share that your ski patrol agencies, your search and rescue teams, your EMS responder agencies, as long as they are responding to that emergency call for service, they may be eligible to have a Rapid SOS account query only. And we're happy to work with you and your response agencies to make sure that they have access to that data. Obviously, you know, that location can save lives, and if they have visibility, then perhaps, you know, they can respond a little bit faster or a little bit more effectively. I know the crash stuff has been quite the challenge. And we've been sharing information that we get from agencies to our partners upstream as well. So anything that you would like us to share with them or challenges, we're happy to be that voice. But also making sure that all of your response agencies, should they be eligible, have access to the location and potentially other data that they may need, but at least location to get started. Any questions on those things? Then I'm going to just kind of give you a little show and tell of maybe some data around New Year's Eve here in Colorado. Awesome. I'm going to share my, can I share my screen? Daryl or Holly?
Let me stop sharing and you should be able to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. This one. So we wanted to kind of give you all a little something to see, but this was not actually it. So let me go to the different screen that I had pulled up. It moved on me. Let's try this one. No, it's still pulling up the wrong one. Stand by. I do know how to do this, I promise. Okay. Why is it not wanting to pull up my screen?
Karen, I have it up too. If you want to let me give it a shot, I'm happy to try.
You want to do that, Sam? It's just pulling up the wrong tab for some reason.
Yep.
Thank you. So we have a data science team, and we asked them to kind of pull some data together for this call. The data that you're going to see represents only Uber data and Google calls and payloads that we see through our platform for agencies here. So obviously in public safety, New Year's Eve to be one of the busiest nights across the country. And so for Colorado, what we saw is within the first 10 minutes after midnight, that's the highest kind of call volume, the peak call volume outside of the 4th of July. The call data might provide different insights. So obviously, depending on when and where the data was generated, we had him put this in mountain time as best as possible. So here you'll kind of see what do ELS, which is the Google or Android calls, and Uber calls look like within that first 10 minutes. Where do those, peaks happen or those spikes happen? You all live this every day. We just thought it'd be fun to visualize for you kind of what that call spike looked like. So here's one of the charts to compare some of the calls for New Year's Eve 2022 to 23. Sam, if you want to go to that next one. This one I actually love because it shows how those calls come in within that 10-minute period of time and where those hotspots are across the state. Obviously, the Denver metro area, high population, is going to have a lot of calls, but we see things happening in Grand Junction, down in between probably Colorado Springs to Pueblo, and even out in the mountains, and then up north for all of you in the northern Colorado area. So within that first 10 minutes of time, there was a 525% increase of number of calls in that first 10 minutes versus your normal days. So again, this is with 2 of our data sources only, but just thought this visualization was kind of interesting and that you all might like to see what does traffic look like when calls peak. And Sam, if you want to go to the next one. Here's, calls received. And so this is information that flows within the platform. So we received 2,245,186 calls received. Distributed means what made it to the screen of the telecommunicator. So kudos to all of you that were logged in and looking at your data, because the calls distributed means that you were logged in and somebody was able to see the information and use it as needed. Hopefully we'll get that other number up as you all continue to utilize. And then next one. And of course, again, the value of having kind of that backup view. If there is an outage, if there is a degradation of service, whether it be carrier or equipment related, that information may still be available, at least for wireless calls, in your portal accounts. And I think, Sam, that was the last slide, right?
That's affirmative.
Awesome. So just a little teaser there to show you some of the fun stuff that happened around New Year's Eve here in the state of Colorado. Happy to answer any questions that you all might have, but that concludes our.
And this is Scott. Karen, your video waited just to the last 10 seconds, or your audio to cut out, but I think you were asking if there are any questions from the group, right?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Any questions? Well, hearing none, that is all great detail. Thank you very much, Karen and team, for pulling that together for us. Okay, we will move on to the CCOA update from Kimberly Cole.
This is Kimberly and
Scott,
my.
I apologize. This is Holly. I don't know if I overlooked it, but did Connie provide the 911 Resource Center update? I know that there was not a fire prevention one, but I do see information entered into the standing report for the Resource Center.
I apologize on that, Holly. She's attending another call right now, so she didn't give a verbal update, and I did skip right over her for the fire prevention, so I apologize. Connie, so to your point, for the Resource Center, there is a written update, so folks can take a look at that. It is posted here in the materials for the task force meeting. Connie, if you are not on your call, is there any update you would like to provide for the Division of Fire Prevention?
I am still on the call, but I just wanted to reiterate the great news that Daryl said on the breaking news about the legislation. I can tell you that Abigail and Jack are both very enthusiastic about this legislation for the Resource Center, and their driving force is the videos that are being produced by Abigail with She Consulting and SHE Consulting. And I think that's about it. I will tack on to what Deanie said about please do participate with the Radio Summit. A lot of good information. The SCIP workshops are going on right now. That's the statewide interoperability for the radios. A lot of good information. They are including 911 this year more in those workshops than I've ever seen in participation. And that's about it for my update.
Thank you, Connie. And anything related to fire prevention that you wanted to share?
Well, that one's still going on. It'll go on for another 3 hours.
Gotcha. Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thank you, Holly, for reminding me. Okay, so now we'll go to Kimberly for her update on CCOA.
This is Kimberly. Thank you, Scott. And my report is submitted there. We're up to 20 member agencies. And so they're listed. Again, if you're interested in joining the CCOA, we're doing a lot of work as it relates to the tariff. We did a lot of work with the rules, monitoring federal initiatives, etc. So it's a great way for the Colorado 911 authorities to come together and work together on these issues that impact us. Our website is stood up, so if you want to take a look at our website, you can do that as well, and that's listed in the report. So I know we're short on time, so I'll just pause and see if anybody has any questions for the CCOA. Great, thank you.
This is Scott. Thank you very much, Kimberly. Appreciate it. We will move on to Amanda for the SWIC report.
Just a reminder, we have the SCIP workshop coming up on February 8th at the SEOC in Centennial. It will be from 8 to 4. It is a hybrid format, so if you can't make it in person, you can definitely still tune in and participate. We've been having webinars to prepare for the workshop. We just had on the 10th, we had the governance webinar. Today we had cybersecurity. We have 2 more, one on January 17th from 9 to 11 for funding, and tribal is on the 19th at 9 to 11. If anyone wants to participate and hasn't received an invitation, please reach out to me and I can definitely send that. And that's all I have.
This is Scott. Thank you, Amanda. Any questions for Amanda? Okay. Well, we are running a little later, so I would propose that we do take a 10-minute break for lunch, give people a chance to get up, move around, grab something. Daryl and Joe, do you think you could crank through your 3 new items in about 28 minutes?
Yes, they shouldn't take that long.
Perfect. Well, why don't we reconvene at 12:32?
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. All right, this is Scott. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you, Holly, for the timer. So why don't we go ahead with the next item on the agenda, which under new business is a discussion idea from Daryl and Joe on a new group email address for PSAP contacts to notify PSAPs of outages, suspicious activity, etc. So Daryl, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I put Joe's name on here just to basically give him credit because he's the one who suggested it to me, but I wanted to bring it up to the group here today. And if Joe has anything to add, he can. Joe noticed that a number of the emails that I send out to the Colorado 911 email list, which goes to a lot of people who work in the 911 centers, in addition to just managers and supervisors, might be better focused to just supervisors and managers, people who would be most responsible for taking action on suspicious activity, suspicious 911 calls, outages, and things like that. So he suggested that we have a new group email address just for those types of contacts. So I wanted to see if anybody had any feedback, if you think that's a good idea, or if it's better to continue sending that type of information to the wider group. I'm open to your feedback on that.
This is Ryan at Vero. I kind of like that idea. I had a similar question. Daryl, I think long ago I had asked you before I was even involved with this committee, if there was somewhat of a centralized database of contact information for PSAPs around the state for certain situations. And I don't think there was at the time. I don't know if that's evolved or what, but I've also been asking other states Vero's involved with, Kansas and Nebraska, South Dakota, Wyoming, et cetera. But something like that sounds like a good idea to me.
Well, we do have a list of contacts on the 911 program website, but it's not as easy as sending an email to all of them. You could copy and paste the email into the to field, but it's not exactly the same as having a group email address that we keep maintained.
Gotcha. Okay, and the reason that occurred to me initially was more for the more widespread federal FCC mandates with outages and such, and God forbid something like major ever does happen that constitutes a particular kind of a big outage. But if it does, an easy way to get in contact with the correct PSAPs that may be involved or be affected by the outage.
Let me ask it this way: would anybody be opposed to me creating a email list for that, or a group email for that purpose that would include really include PSAP managers, and then if PSAP managers want to add supervisors, we could do that, and then also I would include executives for 911 authorities because frequently they're involved in those kinds of issues as well.
This is Jennifer.
Jennifer?
I think the idea is a fantastic one, and I would propose that when we have an outage, that this just goes out to that whole list, and that way everybody in the state is aware that there's an outage somewhere and can be on the watch in case it spreads or is more widespread than we thought, and then we could make people aware that way.
I think that's a good point, Jennifer. I would worry that some people might start ignoring the list if they're getting lots of outage notifications that are not relevant to their area. I don't know. I think that's something we've talked about in the past, though, and that was a concern that was brought up.
Well, if we're having that many outages, then we got a bigger issue.
True.
Well, unfortunately, when you start looking at originating service provider outages, there's always something going on, unfortunately.
Sure, and I take your point. I'm just thinking about a situation we had late last year where we had an outage, but that outage notification didn't come to us. It actually went to surrounding agencies, and it turned out to be a real mess. So it just seems like if we're going to have that listserv anyway, then maybe having that situational awareness can be helpful. But I would defer to the group.
Daryl, part of my thinking was that there are a lot of messages that come out from you and come out regarding 911, and they're not particularly urgent matters or high priority matters. And, I may say, well, I'll look at these this evening when I have some time and not, even pay any attention to them. but some of the emails you're sending out now seem to be of much more, a higher priority for PSAPs. And my thinking was they would also come, you know, perhaps it might come from an email address of Colorado 911 alert or something like that, that would, you know, trigger people to understand it's a higher priority. And if there are different types of things like outages, maybe you have a separate email group to report outages that has an email address indicating that, so that people can understand, okay, this is something I want to look at now, or no, I don't need to look at this right now.
Well, Joe, I think everything I put out is very urgent. Just kidding. No, I get your point. I think it's a good idea to have different levels.
Too.
I'm sorry, Joe, was that?
I said, I think all my stuff is critical too, and if you don't read it now, you're really missing out. But
yeah. No, but I get your point, and I think that is I think there's a lot of validity to that. And
yeah, but Joe, yours takes a lot longer to read. This is Matt. I like the idea of maybe an OSP outage address and a BES outage address.
And then I guess the question, if we're doing one for outages, and that's one of the purposes of it, you know, the carriers notify the PSAPs directly of outages. You know, could we also get the carriers to include that group email address in their notifications? And that's something I can maybe look into.
well, when a carrier notifies a PSAP, they're saying, we know there's an outage affecting your area. We want you to know. You need to know. And when a PSAP is notifying other PSAPs, hey, we're having an outage, you may be having an outage, that's a little bit different in terms of priority. There were also some emails, I think, that were about false calls based on experiences in other states.
Right.
And that, you know, I think that was what I was actually thinking about. Gee, this is something that is different priority wise and different in the special, like, that's not something I would have, you know, have any action to item based on that. But there are people who need to say, hey, this is something that I need to respect. You know, that was the idea. And my thought hearing the discussion now is there might be some different categories, and I don't see a reason you can't have as many email lists as you want.
Yeah, I mean, they're not that hard to maintain, so having multiple lists is not too difficult. You just have to remember to update all of them when you update one of them.
And what people can keep straight.
Yeah. Well, I will do some more, because time is short today. I'll just do some more investigation on that, and I might be reaching out to the PSAP contacts to see if they have any thoughts on this as well. And but I do think it's worth investigating further.
And maybe along with that, Daryl, this is Ryan again at Bureau. Part of the FCC mandate is not only email, but by telephone. And I have hundreds of telephone numbers for PSAPs we deal with. And some of them are phase 0, some of them are admin lines, some of them are admin lines which only get answered at certain times of the day and not during the evening. Some of them go to voicemails. And among the phase 0s, some of the phase 0s route to the dispatch board, which is a bad way to call with an admin question or an admin comment. And some of them don't. Some of them actually route to an actual admin phone in the office. Is there any kind of information on a best contact number, 24/7 non-emergency contact number for PSAPs? And maybe that question can float for a while and let people consider it, but that's something I've dealt with as well.
Well, that contact list that's on the program website, and there's also a contact list on the Resource Center website, and they should be pretty much lockstep, but there might be some discrepancies between the two.
Okay.
They do include general phone numbers for the PSAP,
Okay.
Whether that's the number the PSAP wants you to call for specific things, I think that's going to be kind of up to the PSAP, and that may be part of the difficulty in putting together a master list of numbers for various purposes, is that each center might have different preferences on that.
Correct. Okay. And these lists, you said they're lockstep. Does that mean they're pretty much maintained?
As soon as I find out about an update, I update mine, and I try to also let Connie know so she can update hers.
Okay. And I think that's the same one I used before when you and I talked long ago. So, okay.
Mhm.
Daryl, this is Cindy from Cinch.
Cindy?
Yeah, my team at Cinch is actually one of the teams that is responsible for our company of collecting contact information and collecting that 10-digit number, and especially with this FCC report, making sure we have the right outage notification contacts. So I'd be interested in having a follow-up conversation with you specifically about the idea of including, I know we could definitely include a bulk email along with notifying the specific PSAP, but if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to touch base with you to have more of a conversation about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are in the midst of making, as I'm sure a lot of OSPs are, making phone calls to try to make sure we have the right contact information in the event that's an outage, so we can do that notification. So if you haven't already, I'm sure there's a lot of PSAPs that are hearing from us, like I said, among other phone calls from other carriers. So.
Daryl?
Joe?
Do the address list that we have on the websites, do they set out the number to be called to report outages, or in light of FCC actions, should we expand the data that we put in each listing, and maybe save PSAPs from having to answer calls from all of the OSPs? I know Bretza gets remittances from at least 200 carriers a month, so I don't think they want to be getting calls from 200 people.
Well, I think it depends on what they're calling about, right? If they're calling to report an outage, the PSAP should be notified of that pretty rapidly.
No, I mean, if they're calling to say, what is your number to call if you have an outage? It'd be easier to tell you once on a database.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe.
Well, I know in the past, the annual data collection that the Resource Center does, that was one of the questions that was asked, is what number should carriers call? And we've never really done anything with it because the responses we got back were fairly incomplete. But that may be something that when we do the annual data collection this year, from my office or from the Resource Center, we could include that again and emphasize the importance of filling that part out. And once we have a good list of outage reporting phone numbers for all of the PSAPs, we could include that in this list, so that it's not just the admin line or the direct line for the contact that's here, but also a line for reporting outages.
This is Jennifer.
Jennifer?
I don't know about anybody else, but I get emails on a regular basis from BESPs and other phone companies verifying our contact information specifically for outage notifications. So some of the carriers are doing that work on their own as well.
Yeah, they should be. Okay, well, thank you. I'll do some more investigation on that, and maybe I'll have something to report back at the next meeting.
This is Scott. Thanks, Daryl. So let's jump over to the Colorado 911 document introduction.
So I want to give credit to, I think it was Jennifer who recommended this. I believe it was at the September task force meeting. And I've been working on it since then. We were talking about how useful it might be for someone who gets promoted into a manager position, or maybe they are already a manager, but they've just moved here from another state. So they might not be as familiar with how we do things regarding 911 in Colorado. So the idea was to create a draft or create a document that would basically serve as a primer, an introduction to how 911 is organized in Colorado. So I've been working on this and getting feedback from Jennifer and other particular stakeholders that I shared this with. I'm not asking for anything today, but I wanted to introduce it to you and let you know that this document is in the works. I think my next step might be to share this through the report committee, as well as to send a copy to for feedback to the Colorado NENA APCO chapters, CCOA, maybe even PSCS, any organization that might have some input to improve this document. I'm hoping to have this finalized by the time we get together again in March. And then the idea is that this will live on the 911 program website, and maybe a copy of it on the Resource Center website so that people have a way to access it, and then we can, put it on a schedule to be updated every year or two. So I not really asking for anything at this point, unless anybody has some feedback that they want to share now, but I wanted to let you know that this document is coming.
This is Jennifer. I want to say thank you so much to Daryl for taking an idea and running with it and making it a reality. I was just floored when I got it for review, and I do think that it's going to be extremely helpful to 911 centers across the state. So thank you again for taking that and running with it and making it a reality.
Thank you for having the idea.
Scott, thank you both. Really appreciate that. So then, Daryl, let's move over to the last new item, which is the new satellite-based 911 support from T-Mobile and Apple.
So Kimberly's brought this up at past meetings. I've tried to get somebody from Apple to come to one of our meetings and give a brief update. And at first they seemed very enthusiastic about that, and then they stopped answering my emails. So I guess I'm just that annoying. But everyone, I think, is aware, or I hope you are, that Apple has included in their latest iOS update satellite support for sending emergency text messages. And Kimberly, I believe you've done some testing with it up in Laramie County, or maybe I'm thinking of someone else. But Joe also pointed out that T-Mobile has stated that they're starting to support emergency calls via satellite as well. And just recently, even though it's not listed in here because it's that recent, I saw that Android may support emergency text messaging by satellite in the future as well. And I think this is particularly important in Colorado, where so many areas of our state have very spotty wireless coverage, but if you have an emergency in those areas, the ability to be able to send a text message by satellite would be potentially very helpful. So Kimberly's saying that in the chat, Kimberly said that at the last task force meeting, she shared some screenshots being called of calls being delivered into her Viper system. And if anybody would like those screenshots, let her know and she can share those with you. I think as far as I know, the T-Mobile satellite support is not live yet. But as we learn of T-Mobile turning these on or Android moving forward with these, I'll try to keep everybody updated. But if anybody else learns of these, because I'm only one person, if anybody else learns of these, make sure to share them with the group, because I think the availability of these will be very important to know. And it would probably not be a bad idea at all to do some training of your staff so that they know what to expect when these types of calls come in, so that they can be responded to appropriately. And Joe's the one who suggested that we have this on the agenda again. So I don't know if Joe, if you've had anything to add to that.
No.
Okay. So that's all I have. Scott, thank you.
This is Scott. Thank you, Daryl, again for that information as well. And thank you, Kimberly, for providing that data as well. It's very helpful. Okay, we will move on to open discussion. Anybody have items you would like to bring forward? Okay, hearing none, just would like to say again, thank you all for the opportunity to serve as the chair this past year. It was actually very, very enjoyable. I enjoyed working with you all, but I'm still going to be around. Been participating in the task force for about a decade before, and I expect I'll continue to do it going forward. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Hope your new year's off to a great start, and we'll be back together in March. So take care.
And I just want to say before everyone jumps off, I just want to say thank you, Scott, for all of your hard work over the last year, and we really do appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. You're not going anywhere because we won't let you.
Well, thank you, Daryl. I appreciate that. And I just realized I forgot to call for a motion. So anybody who would like to stay for a while longer, or can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thanks, Matt. Can I get a second?
Kathy seconds.
And thank you, Kathy. All right. Any opposed? All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Have a great new year, and we'll be back together in March. Take care.
Thank you, Scott, and everyone else. Take care.